Hey, I'm Laura. Just quickly, we here at Grit TV are proud to bring you independently produced content every day. Now it's your chance to help us. Grit TV has been offered a $100,000 challenge grant. Every dollar you give right now between now and June 30th is worth $3 to us. We've only got a few more weeks to meet the match. Will you help? You can donate at our website, grittv.org. Meanwhile, enjoy this clip. Immigration cropped up in primary races from California to Nevada to Kentucky, where Democrats especially hoped the issue would skew Republican primaries in such a way as to alienate a whole lot of voters from that party permanently. But it's not just an issue of partisan politics, though. Real lives are in the balance. In the news in the last few weeks, abuse in immigration detention centers, ICE raids on Gulf cleanup crews. And as a long, jobless summer heats up, we're no doubt going to be hearing a whole lot more about the supposed link between immigration and crime and more louder calls for so-called safe neighborhood rules. Where's it all headed? Mallika Dutt joins me next. First this.
Do you want a governor who has the same position on illegal immigration as the president of Mexico?
I strongly disagree with the recently adopted law in Arizona.
Meg Whitman does.
But as I have said, if that law were to come before me, I would oppose it.
I support what's going on in Arizona. Amnesty is a huge magnet, and it's a mistake.
Mallika Dutt is the executive director of Breakthrough.tv. There's a link at our website. Mallika, that's just one example of what we saw this primary season. Meg Whitman in the Republican primaries in California, widely ahead in the polls until this ad started playing. And in the end, she had a very tight race. What do you make of the way that this issue is still so potent, and why?
Well, I think there's three things that have gone on in the last several months that we're seeing play out currently. The first is that there's still a lot of anxiety about our first African-American president. Despite all of the rhetoric around us being in a post-racial society, let's not make any mistake that race is still a big, big issue in the United States. African-Americans have been criminalized for decades. Now it's immigrants, Latinos, Arab Americans, South Asians. I mean, basically you're seeing the criminalization of entire communities, and the whole people of color versus white people thing is not something that anybody wants to talk about. I think the second thing that's going on is that the other issues that are facing us are so structurally huge. So whether it's the financial collapse with no discussion whatsoever about an alternative system or a structure, whether it's the oil spill with no discussion really about alternative energy and in a real way going forward, we're facing a sense of sort of impotence and rage.
So immigrants are an easy cat to kick.
They are very easy because you bring the immigrants together with the race rhetoric and it's like, bingo, you've got your story.
In the news, you carried the story of those ICE raids. They say they were just investigations on the cleanup crews on the Gulf Coast. Most people probably don't know what's going on. Can you tell us?
Well, you know, what's happening is that Obama, I think, has this false notion that if he acts tough on enforcement and ICE goes in and, picks up people who are dealing with one of the biggest catastrophes facing our country, or sending border security guards down to the border in response to the fact that we've got a completely broken immigration system, that somehow he's setting a pathway to immigration reform. Instead, we have a situation where detentions and deportations have increased. Laura, increased under the Obama administration. So a lot of us who've been working on these issues for the last many years are wondering what happened.
Media play a role. We put together a couple of examples of coverage. The first is a news report on a 1,000-strong protest in favor of Arizona's Papers, Please laws, the SB 1070. The second, union coverage of a 100,000-strong protest against. Take a look.
As an American of Mexican descent, I feel that I have to support my country, which is America.
See that Arizona's right.
So it's going to be something they cannot deny. They're going to look on the streets and they're going to see all these people and all of these groups, and they won't be able to deny it.
Media, what role are we playing in all this?
I think media plays a really important role because ultimately, and you probably know this better than anyone else, the narrative, the actual storyline on which all of this rests becomes the plank on which a lot of policies emerge from. So if you have a narrative that says, these are criminals, therefore they have no rights, therefore you can do whatever you want to do to them, versus a narrative that says this country stands for equal protection, our Constitution believes in values of pluralism, dignity, equality. They're two completely different narratives.
Not to mention the media narrative of we must have balance, so the 1,000 on the one hand and the 100,000 on the other come out looking kind of even.
Absolutely. But the thing is that I don't even think that this business of balance is playing out, because I think if you see what they're doing with the 1,000 versus the 100,000, they don't even report the 100,000.
Let me ask you about something that's worrying me, because we're looking at a congruence, as you said, a confluence of events of unemployment, massive unemployment, and continuing unemployment into many, many weeks at its highest level on record. The language around security, and that Arizona law is called the Safe Neighborhoods Act, is going to be heard more and more. And maybe it's because of this whole Helen Thomas brouhaha that has broken in the last few days, where Helen Thomas got a lot of grief for what was perceived as an anti-Semitic reference to sending Jews back to the place where there were death camps. But I've been reminded of how this has played out in the past. Scapegoating. Anti-Semitism was the scapegoating of a very economically depressed Europe. Immigration, is it as simple as scapegoating? And if it is that, what can we do to stop history repeating?
I think scapegoating is a part of it, Laura, but I think it's actually a much bigger issue. I mean, this country is going through a massive transformation in terms of its demographics. And we are looking at a point in 2020, 2050, looking at, different takes on this, where we're looking at the Caucasian American community becoming a minority. The other thing that we're dealing with is sort of massive global migration in the context of globalization and globalized economies, which are actually destroying entire countries, our planet, the climate, and we're not having conversations at that level. Our ability to have big conversations seems to have just diminished over time.
And presumably, if the primaries play out as so many expect, we'll see come November an even more polarized debate as politicians, particularly on the right, enter into these races.
Well, for politicians on the right, isn't it much more convenient to be scapegoating immigrants than dealing with the fact that oil is really something that we've got to stop, and offshore drilling is really something that we have to deal with, or that these multinational corporations or the financial institutions are totally out of control?
So quickly, what do we do, Mallika?
I think that those of us who are engaged in these battles really need to come together in a much more serious way. All of us. I mean, there is civil disobedience happening by the hundreds of thousands across the country.
A woman hunger striking outside Charles Schumer's office.
Absolutely. People are getting arrested. Civil disobedience has been a very important strategy that we've used to score important victories in the civil rights movement. And I think it's time for us to understand that this is the human rights moment in the United States.
All right, Mallika Dutt, you can get more information about Breakthrough at our website, grittv.org. We'll have you back very soon. Thanks for coming in.